Max Verstappen got penalized after the race was already finished. Not for a crash. Not for a fight. For crossing a line, by a margin so small it took extra footage to even confirm it. And that would already be shocking. But it gets worse. Because in that same Miami weekend, the FIA handed out at least 9 penalties, disqualified a Red Bull car over just 2 millimeters, and started reviewing incidents hours after the checkered flag. That's not normal enforcement. That's a complete shift in how Formula One is being controlled. And here's the real problem? If Red Bull's entire dominance is built on pushing the absolute limit, then what happens when the limit becomes this precise? Because this time, it was just 5 seconds. Next time, it might be everything. At first, it didn't look like a Red Bull problem at all. It looked like chaos. Small mistakes scattered across the grid. Different drivers getting caught out, different teams being investigated, nothing that clearly pointed in one direction. A deleted lap here. A warning there. An investigation that didn't lead anywhere. Easy to ignore. But then something started to change. The decisions didn't stop, they multiplied. 1 penalty became 2. 2 became 5. And before anyone fully realized it, the FIA had issued at least 9 separate sanctions over a single weekend in Miami. That's when it stopped being noise. Because in Formula One, when something happens that often, that consistently, it's not random. It's deliberate. Think of it like driving on a road you know perfectly. You've taken the same corners 100 times. You know exactly how far you can push. Then suddenly, without warning, cameras appear everywhere. Every small mistake gets recorded. Every inch matters. That's exactly what Miami became. And the drivers felt it immediately. Albon lost his time and dropped down the order after exceeding track limits. Norris had to explain himself just to keep his pole position after being investigated. Antonelli pushed too far in the sprint and lost positions because of repeated track limit violations. Leclerc crossed the limit at the worst possible moment, and only found out the consequences after the race had already ended. Different drivers. Different situations. Same outcome. And here's where it starts to feel uncomfortable. Because while all of this was happening across the grid, Red Bull wasn't just another team in the story. They were about to become the center of it. Not because of one big mistake, but because of 2 incredibly small ones. And both of them would reveal the same problem. And this is where everything stops being random and starts pointing directly at Red Bull. Because while other teams were making visible mistakes, Red Bull's problems were almost invisible. The first one didn't even happen on track. It happened in the garage. Quiet, technical, easy to miss unless you knew exactly what to look for. Isaac Hadjar's car failed inspection. Not because of damage. Not because of contact. Because of 2 millimeters. That's it. 2 millimeters outside the legal limit on the floor of the car, and the entire result was erased. Disqualified. No negotiation. Now think about how extreme that is. In a sport where cars are built with incredible precision, where every component is designed to push performance to the limit, 2 millimeters is nothing. You can't see it. You can't feel it. But the FIA can measure it. And that's all that matters. Because in Formula One, you're either inside the rules, or you're not. And Red Bull, even if only slightly, was not. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. This wasn't a driver mistake. This wasn't pressure in the moment. This came from the design of the car itself. From decisions made before the race even began. Which means Red Bull wasn't just pushing limits during the race. They were pushing them before it even started. And that's a completely different level of risk. But it doesn't stop there. Because just when it looked like that would be the biggest issue for Red Bull, something else happened. Something even more subtle. Max Verstappen. The race ends. Everything looks settled. Positions confirmed. No immediate drama. And then, hours later, the FIA steps in again. They review new footage. New angles. More precise data. And they find something. A tiny detail. The front left tire crossing the white line at pit exit. Not aggressively. Not clearly. Just enough. 5 seconds. That's the penalty. And on paper, it looks harmless. It didn't change his position. It didn't cost him the race. But that's not what matters. What matters is the pattern. One issue in the garage. One issue on track. Both decided by margins so small, they're almost impossible to see. And both punished. That's not coincidence. That's a system tightening. And for a team like Red Bull, that's where the real danger begins. Because their entire advantage comes from operating right at that edge. Finding performance where others stay safe. But when the edge becomes this sharp, even the smallest step too far is enough to bring everything down. And now the pressure shifts from the car to the driver. Because once the FIA starts enforcing rules at this level, it changes how every driver behaves on track. Not just what they do, but how they think. Take Verstappen in that exact moment. You're exiting the pit lane, full concentration, managing speed, watching the blend line, checking mirrors, preparing for the next phase of the race. Everything is happening fast. And now, there's something else in your mind. A white line. A line you can't fully judge from inside the cockpit. A line that, if you touch it even slightly, might not be called immediately, but could be reviewed later. That's the difference now. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Because Formula One drivers don't operate with hesitation. They rely on instinct. Precision at the limit. But introduce doubt, even a fraction of it, and everything changes. Brake a little earlier, just to be safe, you lose time. Take a slightly tighter line, the car becomes unstable. Give yourself margin, and suddenly, someone behind is faster. So now drivers are trapped. Push to the limit, risk a penalty. Hold back, lose performance. There's no clean option anymore. And Miami exposed that perfectly. Track limits weren't just isolated mistakes. They were happening everywhere. Antonelli exceeded them multiple times and dropped positions after the sprint. Leclerc, under pressure at the end of the race, crossed that invisible boundary again and again, and paid a huge price after everything was over. Even Norris, who avoided a penalty in the end, still had to defend himself in front of the stewards just to keep his result. Different drivers. Same situation. The limit isn't just tight, it's unpredictable. And now bring that back to Red Bull. Because this is where the tension becomes real. Red Bull doesn't dominate by playing safe. They dominate by being sharper, more aggressive, more precise than everyone else. They operate closer to the limit than any other team. That's their strength. But now, it's becoming their biggest risk. Because when the FIA starts reviewing races after they finish, when decisions come from new angles, new data, more precise measurements, you can do everything right in the moment, and still be wrong later. That uncertainty is the real problem. Because now, it's not just about being the fastest on track. It's about surviving what happens after the race ends. And for a team that lives on the edge, that's where things start to fall apart. And this is where Miami stops being just a difficult weekend, and starts looking like a warning for what's coming next. Because once you step back and connect everything, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The FIA didn't just react to incidents. They controlled them. They waited, they reviewed, they analyzed new footage, and then made decisions after the race was already finished. That changes everything. Because now, the race doesn't end when the checkered flag drops. It ends when the FIA finishes checking every detail. And that creates something teams absolutely hate. Uncertainty. Think about strategy for a moment. Every decision a team makes during a race is based on timing. When to push. When to defend. When to take a risk. All of that depends on one key assumption. That what happens on track is final. But now, it isn't. Because you can cross the line thinking everything is secure, only to lose time, positions, or even your entire result later. Just like Leclerc. He finished the race, only to be hit with a massive penalty hours after it ended, dropping him down the order. That's not just a punishment. That's a delayed consequence. And delayed consequences are far more dangerous. Because you can't react to them. You can't fix the mistake. You can't adapt your race. You just have to wait, and hope. Now bring that back to Red Bull. A team that has built its success on precision. On timing. On pushing every limit at exactly the right moment. If even a perfect race can be questioned after it ends, then how do you plan? How do you take risks? How do you know where the real limit is? That's the problem Miami exposed. Not speed. Not performance. Control. Because for the first time, Red Bull isn't just controlling the race. They're being controlled by something else. A system that is more detailed, more precise, and less forgiving than ever. And when you combine that with how close they already operate to the edge, you get a dangerous situation. Because eventually, one of those post-race decisions won't be small. It won't be 5 seconds. It will come at the worst possible moment. A fight for the win. A crucial race in the championship. A situation where there's no margin left. And when that happens, it won't feel sudden. It will feel like everything that started in Miami, finally catching up to them. And this is where everything finally comes together, because the Verstappen penalty was never really about the penalty itself. It was about what it revealed. A shift that had already started, but wasn't obvious until Miami forced everyone to see it. Look at the full picture again. A Red Bull car disqualified over 2 millimeters. A world champion penalized after the race for barely crossing a line. Multiple drivers caught out by track limits, even when pushing at their absolute best. At least 9 sanctions in a single weekend. That's not chaos. That's calibration. The FIA is redefining the limit, not by changing the rules on paper, but by enforcing them with a level of precision we haven't seen before. And Red Bull, more than any other team, is directly exposed to that change. Because their entire dominance is built on one idea: operate closer to the limit than everyone else. Find performance in the smallest margins. Live where others are afraid to go. But now, that space is disappearing. And when there's no space left between legal and illegal, there's no room for error. That's the real danger. Because nothing dramatic has happened yet. No lost victories. No championships decided. But the conditions have changed. Quietly. Relentlessly. And maybe permanently. Because from this moment forward, every race becomes a different kind of challenge. Not just speed. Not just strategy. Precision under a microscope. Every pit exit. Every corner. Every millimeter of the car. Everything is being watched and potentially reviewed later. And that creates a new kind of pressure. The kind you can't see, but always feel. Because now, even when you think you've done everything perfectly, there's still doubt. And doubt slows you down. Even if it's just a fraction. And in Formula 1, a fraction is everything. So in the end, the real story isn't that Verstappen got 5 seconds. It's that those 5 seconds changed the environment around Red Bull. They exposed a system that is tightening, race by race. A system where the smallest detail can decide everything. And a system that doesn't forgive mistakes, even the invisible ones. So now the question isn't whether Red Bull is still fast enough. It's whether they can survive in a world where being fast is no longer enough. Because if Miami proved anything, it's that the limit is no longer where Red Bull thinks it is. And the next time they cross it, it might not be small. It might not be harmless. It might be the moment that defines their entire season.